Have you ever noticed how suddenly everyone is talking about perimenopause? As if it's a monster hiding in your mid to late 30s, waiting to jump out and ruin your life. Every symptom, whether it's fatigue, bloating, mood swings, heavy periods, brain fog, you know, bicycle accident, you get stamped with the label perimenopause. But here's the truth nobody's saying. Perimenopause is not a diagnosis. It's not a hormone collapse. It's not a countdown to feeling old or just losing it. It is not even one single thing. And if you've been feeling overwhelmed, confused, or even scared about what your body is doing, I need you to hear this. Your body is not breaking. It's communicating. And we've been taught the wrong language. Today, I'm going to walk through the 5 biggest perimenopause myths that keep women stuck in fear, confusion, and frustration. And I want to give you the real physiology behind what's happening in your body. This episode is definitely part of my perimenopause paradigm shift. It's a movement to rewrite the narrative and give women back clarity, confidence, and control. So let's dive in. This is episode 178, the 5 biggest myths about perimenopause and the truth behind them. So let's talk about the idea of perimenopause as a diagnosis. This is myth number 1 for you all. So perimenopause. Oh my gosh. Okay, it's a myth. Myth number 1, perimenopause is a diagnosis. It is the biggest one here, and it's the most inaccurate. And it's because it is not a medical diagnosis. Now, doctors are talking about it. People are talking about it because it's a community, right? And it's also a big lump bucket. But when you have a medical diagnosis, you have to know that there's a lab test to confirm it. There's a set of criteria in order to diagnose it. And it has to start at a certain point or occur in a progression where you have kind of okay, this is where it happened. So perimenopause is not a medical diagnosis. There is no lab test that confirms it. There is no set of criteria required for it. And there is no definitive point where it begins. So instead, the term is a really loose descriptor. It's a bucket. It is a loose descriptor for hormonal shifts that happen anywhere from your late 30s to your late 40s and really into the early 50s. So here's what I want you to understand. Your hormones are not failing, okay? Your hormone communication system is adapting, and there is a natural transition in life. What is not normal is the amount of stress, inflammation, and metabolic pressure that modern life puts on your body, which makes this transition feel even harder. So no, you're not in perimenopause. You're in a hormone communication shift that can be regulated. However, it's really hard to tell people they're in a hormone communication shift. And so people use the word perimenopause. And I think that's okay. I think using the idea of using the word perimenopause is just something to it can help us out. It can help us out if we understand that it's not a label that we have to live under. It's kind of helping us say hey, there's a community that we can support. And so we're using this term perimenopause. I'll be using the term perimenopause, but what it really means is stuff's happening and we have to get a hold of it. Okay. But first of all, just know it's not a medical diagnosis. It's used as a label to be able, I think, that we can do to help people identify problems, but don't get stuck in the bucket of any label or diagnosis. Myth number 2, okay, hormones decline sharply and permanently. Now, as an OB-GYN in my training, I understand all about ovarian reserve, and there's pivotal points where the body's okay, we're going to have some decline. So that's 38, 39 years old. That happens there. We get into 52. But these can be improved and affected, and they are not permanent. In fact, I work with people in their 70s who are modifying their hormones and their hormone levels. So don't think that hormone decline is just like you're falling off the cliff. And that once you're off the cliff, you're stuck off the cliff. Especially listening to people in perimenopause communities who are like, I'm just being told that. It's like, and I don't believe it, but I don't know what to do. And so I want you to just realize this so because I want to help you, right? So narratives often come from really outdated research, misinterpreted graphs. When I say outdated research, I also mean inadequate research. All right. But remember that estrogen does not decline in a straight line. There's a lot of times throughout the cycle, even in a month, where it's up, it's down, it's kind of flatlined for a few days. So then we start to see, okay, these can happen in our estrogen levels, like a lot of times in our lives, right? There's a ebb and flow to our hormones, and we need that, right? We don't need to be in full throttle high estrogen all the time. That's really not a good place to be. Nor full throttle high progesterone, right? Nor high throttle cortisol or stress hormones. Anything needs to have some cyclic nature to it, right? Like if you had melatonin high all the time, you would be sleeping all the time. So I'm just saying that just to kind of give you some, understanding because a lot of this stuff is really overwhelming, right? And so I want you to know that. And I want you to recognize too that hormones change, evolve, and we can work on them. We can support them, okay? Because your ovaries are still working. I know that's a what, but I will tell you in all my years of working with patients, I so often have to counsel them on the fact that even at menopause, that doesn't mean the ovaries shut off. And I like to look at FSH, follicular stimulating hormone, as another lab to see the message of the brain to the ovaries. What's the workhorse element going on? How much is our brain having to tell our ovaries to work? So we have some other indicators and biomarkers that can be really helpful. But remember, your ovaries are still working and we want them to work because that is a lot about vitality. And in many ways, ovulation is still happening. Sometimes it's regular, sometimes it's irregular. Okay. Progesterone can be normal one month, it can be low the next month. So there can be fluctuations. We do want stability, but we also want those cycles. But remember, it's not a collapse, right? And yes, it might feel chaotic, but it's not the end of it, okay? Because it's adaptation that's happening. And sometimes prioritization in your body, especially if your body is having to deal with stress, sleep disruptions, um, changes in your gut, infection, things like that. Or in some people are actually they're dealing with cancer diagnosis. And in that case too, well, it's a lot to contend with for the body. And it will definitely impact hormone production, right? But we can work through those things. So don't think any of that is permanent. These adjustments need to be supported. Here's myth number 3. Every symptom after 35 is perimenopause. And this is my Drew Barrymore story. So I don't know Drew Barrymore personally, and I have a feeling she's a really nice person. But I remember she recently was getting behind and supporting a certain supplement because she said something like, at 35, it was done for me. I was like, what? Seriously? This is what you're putting out here for all of us to follow and think of? And it's not true. I mean, she's not a doctor. She's not thinking about this. She's being told, and her symptoms got better. So she's like, yeah, I was in perimenopause because I was feeling horrible. I couldn't sleep. My hair was falling out. I was gaining weight. My metabolism was slowing. You know all those things. And you probably have your own list and some unique ones. But not because she was 35. Okay? There's a lot that goes into life. So if you're if you're dealing with something, you need to be respected that you're having a symptom and not be dumped into the perimenopause bucket. Because this one really challenges me because I think it robs people of real solutions. Because when you get mislabeled as perimenopause, right, there's a lot of things that are happening. Fatigue, there's reasons for fatigue. Oh, you have perimenopause. Okay, what do I do with that? I still have fatigue. Address the fatigue. That's the same with things like bloating, anxiety, PMS, sleep issues, migraines, definitely mood swings and feeling overwhelmed. Obviously, brain fog, weight gain or weight instability, irregular periods, right? There's a lot that can cause these symptoms too. So when people come into my office and they're like, I'm in perimenopause, I'm like, okay, well, what's actually going on with you? Because I can't really do anything with a label of perimenopause. I need to know what your symptoms are. And people will fill out something called a multi symptom questionnaire. It's called an MSQ. MSQ is pretty good because it looks at the symptoms, but it's also a multi system questionnaire. And that's really what the S is for. A lot of people call it a multi-symptom questionnaire, but really it's a multi-system questionnaire. And that's important because are we dealing with one system or are we dealing all, 9, 10, 11 systems are involved? And when you have more than 2 or 3 systems involved, you feel really bad. And so when you start looking at multi-system problems, that can be a big issue. But we want to be able to know your system involvement, know what your symptoms are within those systems, because we could be looking at blood sugar instability, insulin resistance, stress. We know we're dealing with stress. Every one of you who's listening to this knows that you're dealing with a persistent stress. We know we're handling a little more than what we can handle, right? We know we need breaks, but sometimes we get caught up in it. And that leads to cortisol dysregulation, which is stress. Of course, nutrients are involved with that. We can be really depleted. I see people commonly told they have an okay vitamin D level, and it's 40. And I'm like, 40 is less than okay. 40 is barely over the not having horrible couch surfing symptoms, right? So if you're checking your vitamin D and it's 40, that needs to go up because vitamin D is so critical for everything, including making hormones, right? So you want to look closer to 100. And if you're an endocrinologist, you're probably gasping for air when I say 100 for vitamin D. But that expert opinion that came out in 2013 was a bunch of people sitting around who take care of sick people with diabetes and endocrine disorders. And they were like, well, yeah, let's just, say 30 to 100, 30 to 80 is okay. And anything over that is toxic levels. And if you're under 30, yeah, maybe you have symptoms. It's like, that's not using evidence. That was using expert opinion, but it was a consensus that was based on people who deal with sick people with endocrine disorders. It was not based on health optimization. And so that's really important to understand where some of those reference ranges come from and some of those ideas. Okay, so we see that symptoms can also be caused by the gut being inflamed, right? And other hormone organs and glands like the thyroid. Obviously, if you're getting up to go to the bathroom 2 or 3 times a night, you're going to have horrible sleep patterns, and that's going to definitely affect everything. And one that got me hard was over exercising. I went in with my best friend and I was like, I'm going to exercise. She showed me Orange Theory. I was like, yes, this is it. And I really committed 2 times a week with hot yoga, a few other days. And I was a big puffer and it was horrible. I was so inflamed. I was over exercising. So again, your mind might want to do it. And in some ways your body can do it, but the amount of inflammation that it produces really becomes burdensome on weight gain, bloating, right? And that's not perimenopause, that's stress. Exercising can be stressful, and over-exercising for you can be also very stressful. And so that is something that I had to learn my lesson from. Luckily, I'm over it for the most part, but I have to be aware of it. As I continue to get stronger with exercise and make sure my inflammation has been adjusted with things like aloe support, taking time off, doing extra yoga releasing at night, like little sessions to get out the kinks, if you will, and get the inflammation down. And monitoring my food to make sure that it's really anti-inflammatory on the days that I go and to do Orange Theory. So just remembering these ideas, like we have to be considerate, right? And that's okay. We need to be considerate of our health and our lifestyle factors so that we can learn when to rest, right? When to hold them, when to fold them, know when to walk away and when to run, right? So that's kind of a good lesson, I think, from Johnny Cash. Just recognizing that if you believe you are old, then you are old. But if you believe that you are not, you can make it happen. We just gotta line it up, gotta get good information and addressing these realities. So um, we know that this happens too because our hormones get overwhelmed, they get misaligned, and we can reset the rhythm. And that's why I started the rhythm reset, right? Hormone rhythm reset is so much more than talking about just like what hormone should I take. It's actually connecting to the natural patterns of our body and the framework to rebuild this daily biologic pattern that our hormones depend on to function. So, most of what you're calling perimenopause is actually dysregulation, and dysregulation is fixable. Myth number 4: there's nothing you can do, it's just part of getting older. Please let me say this as clear as I can. Your future of your health is not predetermined by your birthday. And we know a lot of people who hear you're just getting older when they're 25. And then hopefully some of you are blessed to see people who have really taken care of themselves and done the work to take care of the body as a machine and their mind, their emotions and their lifestyle so that they are in their 70s and 80s. And we see these people. Some of people might not even know them personally, but we do see people who have really done a great job. Of course, one of my favorite mentors is Dr. Gladys McGarey. She was on this earth for 103 years, living a hard life sometimes, but a really great life because she based it in gratitude. And people were always asking her, but you're over 100. You're almost 100. You're 100. What? And she goes, I know, but I don't feel that. I have to, do everything still. I have to exercise and eat well and laugh a lot. And, she was very connected to her spiritual beliefs. And she never really connected to her age. She was connected a lot more to her lifestyle and her sense of gratitude. So there's so much you can do to influence the transition of aging, of metabolic aging in particular, because there's chronologic aging, which is your birthday, the number of times you go around the sun, right? But then there's metabolic aging, and that's where the work is. That's where the success is. We want to make sure that we get your circadian rhythms regulated, that we balance your blood sugar. A lot of times when we get stressed out, our blood sugar is unstable and our brain is not getting fed. That's a really big deal because then we start to go into starvation and then it starts to compromise our hormones. So we want to support ovulation, of course, reducing inflammation, and then, of course, making the gut hormone access stronger. So there's a lot we can do. Calming cortisol, getting those micronutrients like vitamin D, CoQ10, B12, omega-3s. Oh yes, definitely omega-3s, right? Improving sleep quality. Johnny Carson brought us a lot of humor in his life, but he also really disrupted people's systems with late night TV. Watching TV in bed was very disruptive. And so we have to move away from some of the patterns in society that really don't support us. And ultimately, we also need to train the nervous system because the nervous system is the master control system. Okay, when we start to prioritize these foundations, I see it in my patients. We notice, right? Steadier, stable moods, regular cycles, definitely easier periods, better sleep, more consistent sleep, less symptoms. And you can measure that in your multi-system questionnaire. Kind of get a sense there, what's going on. A more enduring metabolism, which gives us a lot of strength and a lot of flexibility. So there's some pliability, and that's necessary with metabolism. Obviously, more energy, and the energy is more stable. Reducing bloating, which has a lot to do with inflammation, has a lot to do with the liver too, but it has a lot to do with hormones. And then, of course, that we want to think clear. Aging isn't of itself a disease, but that is metabolic aging. Chronologic aging is somewhat inevitable. So we want to focus on metabolic aging, and that ties in definitely into perimenopause idea. Because you're in perimenopause, so it's just like, it's like permission to age. Please do not accept that permission, okay? You can work and make sure that your body's getting the resources that it needs so that we have quality of life, all right? Because we want that. We don't want dysregulation. And we don't want to just succumb to, oh, that's a label that I'm going to put on myself. Because when you put a label on yourself, it's it's like an end of the road thing, right? There's no place else to go. And that leads into myth number 5. Perimenopause is the beginning of the end. Well, in some respects, just like I said, when you have a label, you're like, oh, I'm in perimenopause. It's like, that's kind of the beginning of the end because there's not really much to do with that idea. It's just a bucket of symptoms and problems. But if you're a 35-year-old that needs to exercise more and more stability, or you need to take some time off and rest, that's really important. So reconsider those ideas, because I believe that is the most damaging myth to believe that perimenopause is the beginning of the end. And it is definitely one that I want to dismantle and push away from people, right? And because people intuitively know that being labeled with something does not make them better. It makes them identified, okay, but it doesn't resolve problems. It does not resolve symptoms. It connects them into a community, but a label does not have resolution. And so many times a label is actually clumping a whole bunch of people that might have some things in common, but have a lot of things that are not in common. When I was in college, I did a qualitative research study on a community in Phoenix, and it was a label. We labeled this group of people, right? And we went to find out more about them and realized there was not very much about them. So if your label is woman, right, which is a label, right? There's a whole bunch of differences. So just looking at a label is a way to kind of group people and for people to connect, but we have to recognize that that's where it starts and ends. And then we need to move into symptomatology, understanding the problems, looking for solutions. The narrative that we've been hearing, of course, it's still that women are the problem, right? Oh, well, that we should still expect chaos. We should expect decline. We should expect masculinization. We should expect misery, right? Because we're caring for other people so much. We should expect once we're losing our periods, we're losing our vitality, right? We should expect that our body's going to fall apart, that things are just not going to work right. But that's all wrong and truly fear-based. Right. And quite honestly, I believe it's based in a patriarchal medical history, and it does nothing but disempower women. So you're not declining. You could very well be evolving. I had a lovely conversation with one of my patients who's in her 70s who feels so much more evolved. And she said to me, Dr. Andrea, I remember when I came in and you said, I want you to be healthy at 100. So in my practice, that's what I work for. Wherever my patients are, I want them to be healthy at 100. Okay, so it's a huge responsibility on my part. It involves a lot of education, and it involves looking at them and making medical recommendations that are not quick fixes, that end up having long-term consequences that are not positive. Instead, I have to look at the long game when I look at a recommendation. So it's a lot, and it's a lot because I want it to be a lot. I want people to be healthy at 100. So back to the story. So she was saying to me, you said that to me, and I was like, man, not really interested in that idea. And I hear that from people. And then she's now, we've been working together for a few years, and she said, wow, I am thinking about this idea of healthy at 100, and I'm thinking, that sounds pretty good, because she's evolving. Because instead of just being told, well, you're old and you have this problem and that problem and that problem, she's like, wow, I'm not declining. I don't have to. I can do the work and I can evolve. And so I just really hope that resonates and sits in your heart, that we can do the work. So when you support these shifts, we can make your body stronger, make your mind wiser, right? And make you more resilient. It's really incredible possibilities. You have incredible possibilities. You are capable of extraordinary health, but the fear story that people put in often blinds us to our own potential. We see that in others, but sometimes it's really important to look at that for ourselves. Okay? Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Okay? Let's restore hope. Let's restore agency, which is such a good idea when we think about cognition. And I saw an interview some years ago with Dick Van Dyke, and I think he was in his early 90s, and the um the interview was really patronizing to him, like, well, you're must be senile, you probably don't get around very much. And Dick Van Dyke did not stand up to that questioning. He did not stand up to it, but he really said, like, I'm the smarter one of the two of us. In a nutshell, he kind of said that, like, I don't know what you think you're telling me, but that's not who I am. I'm smart, I'm capable, I'm athletic, I'm living independent, having a really strong life. And he basically made that interviewer eat his words. So if anyone is telling you all this crap, I want you to definitely make them eat their words. And I want to help you with that. In a nutshell here, and what I want you to take away today is perimenopause. It's not the monster you've been told it is. Okay. Think about yourself, I don't like to come with nots, but I just want to say, like, you're not broken, you're not declining, you are not losing your vitality, and most importantly, you are not powerless. So I want to frame that a little bit differently because you can feel steady, you can feel strong, and you can feel great. And this can happen at any age, especially when you understand the language that your hormones are speaking. You'll respond with clarity instead of fear. I hope this episode really sat in your heart and it made you put on a different lens. And if you want to understand your hormones without fear or confusion, I have a guide for you about hormone balance and your first steps to starting to feel better. So you start walking into this. It's about science, it's about guidance, and also it's about trusting yourself because I believe you. And then if you're ready to go deeper, please stay tuned. Let me know, DM us, put a comment in, like, get in touch with me, please. I'm going to be sharing more about, how you can use the hormone rhythm reset to start feeling steady and grounded through all that life brings. Until then, your body can be trusted, your hormones can be understood, and your best years are being built right now.